Greetings, fellow travelers, vagrants, explorers, wildlanders, and welcome to episode 74 of the Retro Wildlands. My name is Nomad, and this is my gaming podcast where I like to share my thoughts and experiences with a video game that I've discovered or rediscovered while roaming the gaming wildlands. Thank you very much for tuning into the show today. I'm glad you've made it to the campsite, my friends. The fire is burning low tonight, and there's a chill in the air that's got me bundled up just a little tighter than normal. It's spooky season, and when the temperatures drop, the days get a little shorter, and I find myself craving a different kind of gaming experience. Ever since I played the original Resident Evil on the PlayStation when I was younger, I found that I really enjoy putting myself through some scary experiences. The right scary game can offer a unique adrenaline rush, and I love the feeling you get when you overcome a threat or find your way out of a harrowing scenario. And while other video games can be great for pulling the player into their game worlds with their immersive atmospheres, I argue that the best scary games do it better than any other game out there. That sense of tension that ratchets up when you're walking through a tight space. The anxiety you feel when you aren't sure if you saw what you think you saw. And the raw fear that slowly builds when you know that you're not alone. Whoa, easy there, Dee Dee. Our boy Dee Dee gets a little jumpy at times, but don't let that fool you. He's the leader of this expedition, and I trust his instincts, even if his nose points us towards trouble. On today's episode, we're doing something a little different. If you happen to be new to the show, thank you very much for checking us out today. Normally, we'll cover a specific video game and dive deep into that experience to see what it's all about. Tonight, however, I thought it would be fun to get cozy by the campfire and talk about some scary video games. Specifically, I wanted to share with you all the ones that I consider to be my absolute favorites. These are the games that haunt me the most, the ones that make my pulse pound and my palms sweat. These particular games that I want to talk about today have found a way to dig themselves into my head, twist my nerves, and make me question everything that flickers in the dark. Today on the Retro Wildlands, I am counting down my top 10 favorite spooky video games. Before recording this show, I put a call out to the Retro Wildlands community over on our social media pages, as well as in the SuperPod Lounge Discord server, and gave folks the chance to highlight their favorite spooky video games. As I share my favorites, I'll be sprinkling in some of yours too. It should be a great time, and I'm looking forward to descending into the darkness with you all. Now, before we get started though, allow me to set the table. When I put together my list of favorite spooky games, I ranked my list based on three things. First, to qualify for the list, I needed to have played the game before. Second, I considered how genuinely scary I found the game, or how anxiety-inducing the game can be for me personally. How scary something is can be different depending on the person. Something one person finds absolutely terrifying can make other people feel nothing, or even make them laugh. Some of the things that my wife finds to be absolutely horrifying, I feel nothing towards, so I just want to make it clear that I'm basing the scare factor off how I feel personally. And the last thing that I considered when making this list was my genuine want and desire to play the game itself. For me, what makes a great spooky game is its ability to scare and fill you with anxiety and dread, but somehow gets you to come back to it for more. Oh, and I do have to acknowledge that there aren't too many games on my list that I consider retro, so don't be surprised if there's more modern-ish games on this list than there are older ones. While I love my library of retro games, the one thing that continues to get better and better as technology advances is horror games, and I'm not going to bullshit you and say that Friday the 13th on the original Nintendo is the pinnacle of scary experiences. So again, I'm not ranking what I think are the best scary video games of all time, just the ones that scare me the most personally, and the ones I find the most joy to go back and revisit. Alright, my friends, that is enough setup. Pull your chair a little closer to the fire as we dive into my top 10 favorite spooky video games. When I sat down the other day to put this list together, it got me really excited as I thought back to some of the experiences I had, as well as some of the experiences I'm looking forward to having again. I was a little surprised as I was sifting through the games that I'd gathered up, though. For as much as I love scary games, I haven't played nearly as many as I thought I had. I think the reason for that is I seem to only play scary games around Halloween, and that's a habit I need to break this coming year. But either way, I had a decent amount of games to sift through, and I'm pretty happy with this list. Which, by the way, is subject to change based on any new games that I do play in the future, or my mood, which can be fickle at times. Anyway, before getting into the top 10 proper, I did want to shout out a couple games that just barely missed the list that I think are worth a quick shout out. First up, Extinction on the PlayStation 2. This game was one of the first survival horror games on the PS2 that had a wonderfully unsettling atmosphere combined with that trapped and alone vibe. Players take control of Dennis Riley, who's part of a Marine recon team sent to an Antarctic research facility that has gone radio silent. The game does a great job with its atmosphere, with every hallway of the Arctic base seemingly humming with that kind of creepy silence that makes you hold your breath. The monsters in the game are perfectly grotesque, which are mostly mutated forms of what used to be human. There's also a game mechanic where your character can become infected with whatever is floating around, creating these monsters. I really like when games have a mechanic like this. It makes you have to juggle the risk of infection when taking actions and exploring, and there's a real danger in this game if you don't keep the infection in check, lest you become the thing that you're fighting. Extermination isn't a perfect game, it's not even the scariest game, but it is a pretty fun third-person experience that I think you should look into. Next, there's Parasite Eve on the original PlayStation. This game is one of my absolute favorites. Parasite Eve blends a unique RPG battle system with psychological horror and cinematic storytelling, making it a pretty unique experience. Parasite Eve's brand of scares come in the form of some pretty intense body horror scenes, as well as leaning into the idea that the real danger is living inside us, inside every single human cell. Oh, and that opening scene in the Opera House? If I ever put together a list of my favorite video game openings, that scene would absolutely be on that list. You watch the crowd literally burst into flames while the opera music just keeps going, making the whole thing just absolutely haunting and unforgettable. I don't think I was ever personally scared while playing this game, but the tension was absolutely there, and it's hard to not call this game out for its very unique experience. I also have to call out the original Resident Evil on the PlayStation as one of my honorable mentions too. Longtime listeners of the show will probably already have a good idea of my attachment to this game, and I ended up putting this game on my top 10 list pretty early. But eventually I pushed this game off the list for no other reason than I've played this game so much I am no longer scared of it, and there are better games out there as much as it pains me to admit. Still, the OG Resident Evil is where survival horror really took off. I still think back to some of the more iconic moments, like the first zombie reveal, the sound of bone cracking, the slow turn of its head, or the zombie dog that burst through the window. Every creaking door, every shadow down the hall, it all made you second guess your next step. The game wasn't just about fighting zombies and all the other monsters skulking around the halls. It was about managing your resources, but more so, your own fear. The mansion setting, the eerie atmosphere, there was just constant tension, and every move you made felt like it could be your last, and all those moments combined make this game still something I hold very, very dear. My last honorable mention is a game I just recently sat down with and completed, and I wanted to call it out. That game was Silent Hill: The Short Message. This modern first-person game is free to those who have a PlayStation Plus subscription, and it was a pretty memorable experience. The short message is very short and took me only 2 hours or so to finish. It may be smaller in scope, but it's raw, modern, and disturbingly real. The horror in this game doesn't come from the monsters alone, it's a different kind of horror experience where the terror manifests from guilt, trauma, and the things that we try to hide from ourselves. The environments you'll work through are distorted, and there's psychological terrors around every turn. This entry into the Silent Hill universe reimagines the series' iconic horror experience where the game is less about the town itself and more about the horrors that we carry with us. It can be a heavy experience for some, and I ended up writing out a formal review of my own experience and thoughts. I don't know the exact timing, but that review should be live right now on our website, theretrowildlands.com, or it will be live in the very near future, so check it out if you're at all curious. So there's a few of the awesome games that just missed out on my list of personal favorites. Now, it is time to get into the list proper. With some community comments sprinkled in, let's count down my personal top 10 spooky video games. Number 10. Number 10 on my list of favorite spooky video games is actually a game I played for the first time about a week ago at the time of this recording. Released back in 2005, it's a little psychological horror game that is also a first-person shooter. And that game is Fear. As a fan of spooky games, Fear was a game series that I had heard about but never made the time to play any. I own all three on the PlayStation 3 as a matter of fact. When I played the first game through to completion for the very first time, I was pleasantly surprised by the experience and I genuinely had a lot of fun. The game itself isn't perfect, and maybe it's a little recency bias talking, but I was pretty impressed with this game overall. For those that don't know, Fear's story revolves around the Fear Unit. Fear standing for First Encounter Assault Recon. This unit is an elite group of soldiers in the US Army that are tasked with investigating supernatural, paranormal type of events, especially if these events are a threat to the safety and security of everyday citizens like you and me. Fear begins with you stepping into the boots of a new recruit. This recruit doesn't have a name that I'm aware of, but he's always referred to as Point Man. Your mission as Point Man seems simple at first. Hunt down a psychic commander named Paxton Fattel, who's taken control of a squad of clone soldiers and gone rogue. As you track Paxton, though, through the dark office buildings and abandoned industrial sites that you're going to come across, reality starts to bend. Time slows, the lights flicker, and a ghostly little girl in red appears at the edges of your vision. The deeper you go, the more you realize this isn't just a military operation. It is a descent into a nightmare born from experiments that should never have been conducted. Fear is a strange beast. It's one part slow burn ghost story, but also one part pulse pounding first person shooter. One moment you're unleashing bullets in a high octane firefight, and the next you're walking down a hallway that suddenly feels a little too long, the silence pressing in on you. The game had this uncanny ability to make you dread the moments in between battles. You'd clear a room, catch your breath, and then the lights would flicker. A child's laughter would echo from nowhere, and you'd catch a glimpse of a little girl in red before she vanishes again into the darkness. That little girl, Alma, became the face of this game's terror. She wasn't just a monster to run from, she was a haunting presence that made you question what was real and what was in your head. Half the time when I was walking through areas in this game, I had no idea what to expect. I had no idea if what I was fighting was even real or not. The developers knew exactly when to pull back and let your imagination do the work. By the time the game finally revealed its secrets to me, I realized that I had been walking through a ghost story disguised as an action game the whole time. And that's what's made Fear unforgettable for me. Even with its cinematic slow-motion combat and explosive firefights, there was never a moment that I truly felt safe. I was in control of the most powerful soldier in the whole room, but somehow I was never truly in control. Every corridor felt alive, every shadow whispered back, and every flicker of light reminded me that no matter how fast I could shoot, I couldn't escape what was already worming its way into my mind.
Kill them.
Our first community comment came from Lethco, who chimed in over on the SuperPod Lounge Discord server, which is something you could join, listener, if you'd like, and I'll make sure to put a link to that in the show notes. Lethco dropped their favorite spooky game and said, "Uninvited on the NES. For its time, its atmosphere was unmatched, and it tells a great story as well." Wow, Uninvited on the NES. That is a classic I've heard a decent amount of people talk about. Even though I haven't had the chance to play it myself yet, I can totally see why its atmosphere has left such a mark. Just imagining those eerie hallways, sudden scares, and the way it tells its story sounds right up my alley. It's incredible how a game from that era can make your imagination do so much of the work, turning every shadow and creepy door into something truly terrifying. Number 9. My 9th favorite spooky video game is one that I've talked about before and already featured in one of our previous top 10 episodes. It continues to be a guilty pleasure game of mine, and playing it was a Halloween tradition over here until I finally got that sweet, sweet platinum trophy, that is. And that game is Until Dawn. In case you aren't already aware of this game or heard me gushing about it before, Until Dawn more or less is and opens like a classic teen horror movie. A group of friends gathers at a secluded mountain lodge for a weekend getaway, only for a cruel prank to go horribly wrong, leading to absolute tragedy. 1 year later, the group reunites at the same lodge to honor the memory of their lost friends. But as the night wears on, it becomes clear that something sinister is stalking them in the snow-covered wilderness. You play as each member of the group, making choices that will determine who lives and potentially who may die, uncovering dark secrets about the mountain's past and the horrors that lurk beneath it. Until Dawn is part slasher flick, part psychological thriller, and every decision you make brings you closer to, or potentially further from, surviving Until Dawn. What makes this game so frightening to me is how well a job the developers did to pull you headfirst into this world. This is probably going to emerge as a theme throughout this list, but I absolutely love and adore immersion, true immersion that really pulls you into the game world. In Until Dawn, you're not just watching a horror story unfold, you're steering it, one heart-pounding decision at a time. Every choice carries weight, and the game makes sure that you know it too. Open the wrong door, choose the wrong words, hesitate for just a moment too long, and you might watch a character you've grown to admire or become attached to meet a grisly end. That unpredictability always kept me on edge because unlike most other horror games, Until Dawn makes you responsible for who lives and who dies. But beyond the branching story and cinematic presentation, the game's real strength is its atmosphere. This is what always sucked me in, and this is what always gave me anxiety when playing this game. The Snowy Mountain Lodge feels isolated, wrapped in silence and shadow, where every creak of wood or whisper of wind makes you think twice before you move forward. When you're out and about outside the cabin, the camera angles in this game, inside and outside the cabin, remind me of some real classic horror films. The way you're able to view the game world around you has a way of keeping you uneasy, and it shows you just enough to imagine what's lurking out of frame. It's a game that thrives on tension, where even moments of calm are laced with dread. Until Dawn takes a while to reveal what it is that's lurking in the shadows, and that's always been a staple of good horror to me. Let your viewer's imagination, or in this case the players, run wild with what might be out there. And when the horror finally reveals itself, Until Dawn goes all in. In retrospect, it probably goes a little too all in, but that's what makes this game charming to me. What starts as a slasher flick homage turns into something far darker and more supernatural, and it caught me off guard in the best way possible. Oh, and there's no way I don't mention the performances. The performances in this game sell the whole thing too. Especially Rami Malek and Hayden Panettiere, who both do a fantastic job portraying their characters. It's that blend of cinematic storytelling, branching choices, and relentless tension that makes Until Dawn such a memorable descent into horror for me. It's a game that you don't just play, like you literally have to survive it, or at least you try your best to survive it.
We're on Blackwood Mountain by the ski lodge. There's a killer and he's after us. He's already killed one of our friends. Oh God, please help. You've got to help us.
Something tripped the motion sensor. Probably a fucking deer.
I read you, ma'am. Please do not leave your position. We will send out helicopters to get you as soon as the storm has subsided. Over.
What? When? How long?
Dawn, at the earliest. Not until dawn.
Jesus!
Oh my God, he's there. He's coming back.
Before we move on, Aaron from the SuperPod Saga had a couple of his favorite spooky games that he wanted to call out. Aaron said, I have two favorites. My favorite spooky not so scary game is Luigi's Mansion. That game is perfect. All capital letters perfect, by the way. My favorite actual scary game is either Mouthwashing or World of Horror. Hell yeah, good picks all around, Aaron. I have Luigi's Mansion, and I almost made that game the spooky game that I talked about this year. I cannot find a single person who has anything bad to say about that game, and it looks like it has a great balance of spook and charm. And as far as Mouthwashing and World of Horror goes, I already have Mouthwashing downloaded on my PC, I just need to make time to play it. And I've never heard of World of Horror, but looking it up has me genuinely curious. Mouthwashing, though. A few people told me they were genuinely creeped out by it, and the PlayStation 1-esque graphical style has me more than curious. The game has a neat setup where you follow 5 crew members of a spaceship that becomes stranded and supplies are dwindling fast. I can only imagine how intense that must be, so one way or another, mouthwashing will be one of my next horror experiences, guaranteed.
Number 8.
Number 8 is a game that's probably one of the scariest on this list, but it's not one I'm dying to replay, so it's lower on the overall countdown. Does that mean I don't like it? No, not at all. This game is amazing, but holy shit, is it a lot. The game that I am talking about is Outlast. I feel like Outlast has a pretty decent reputation for what it brings to the table. In this first-person experience, Outlast drops you into the shoes of a man named Miles, an investigative journalist who follows a mysterious tip about strange experiments taking place at the Mount Massive Asylum, an isolated psychiatric hospital that's tucked away somewhere in the mountains of Colorado. Armed with nothing but a camcorder, you sneak inside under the cover of night, only to find the place in ruins and its halls crawling with deranged, mutilated patients. As the lights flicker and the screams echo through the vents and down the halls, it becomes painfully clear that something inhuman has been unleashed within these walls. With no weapons to defend yourself, your only hope is to run, hide, and pray to God that you outrun, or better yet, outlast whatever it is that's after you before it's too late. What sets Outlast apart from so many other horror games is how utterly powerless it makes you feel. You're not a soldier or a survivor with a shotgun. You're just a normal journalist, a regular dude with a camcorder stumbling through a nightmare that was never meant to be seen. The game doesn't let you fight back. Your only options are to run, hide, and record whatever it is that you see. That helplessness is where the terror lives. And I understand that Outlast is not the first video game that gives the protagonist very little to defend themselves, if nothing at all, but Outlast is very special and it really executes on this game very, very well. Every time I crawled into a locker or hid my character under a bed, I literally, in real life, was holding my breath, praying the thing that was hunting me didn't check my particular hiding spot, and I willed it to walk the other way. This game is a masterclass in tension, forcing you to feel fear instead of just witnessing it. The camcorder itself becomes your lifeline, and in some ways, it's your curse. The camera has a night vision mode that lets you see through the pitch black hallways of the asylum, but every second you use it drains the battery down. That constant struggle between seeing what's ahead and saving enough power to survive keeps you in a constant state of panic. The game's sound design only makes it worse, well, in a good way. The static hum of the camera, the footsteps echoing somewhere too close, the labored breathing of something you can't see. It is all designed to make your nerves fray one dark corridor at a time. I foolishly played this game for the first time with a pair of headphones and very often found myself questioning if what I heard was in the game or if it was actually in my living room. I almost wish I wore one of those heartbeat monitors because I'm pretty sure through most of the game I felt my heart literally pounding out of my chest. And I loved every minute of it like the psychopath that I am. Beyond the jump scares and the chase sequences though, Outlast as an experience lingers because of its setting and because of its story. The asylum isn't just a backdrop, it's a living, breathing monument to human cruelty. The deeper you go and the more you uncover about the twisted experiments that unleash the horror within, you realize very quickly that you were never meant to escape with the truth, and it'll be a miracle if you end up doing that. The game's experience is claustrophobic, it's relentless, and it's unforgettable. It's the kind of game that makes you set down the controller just to catch your breath, and then pick it right back up because you have to know what it is that's waiting in the dark. Even when you know the right thing to do is run and never look back.
They killed us. They got out. The variants. You can't fight them. You have to hide. You can unlock the main doors from security control. You have to get the fuck out of this terrible place.
Heading back to our community correspondence, Mr. Monotone had some interesting spooky games that they spoke up about over in the SuperPod Lounge Discord server. Mr. Monotone said, "I will tell everyone that will listen to play Fishing Vacation, the cutesy, not Game Boy fishing RPG where it doesn't take too long for you to figure out everything isn't what it is on the surface. A very recent, but also not, favorite is Clock Tower Rewind. What human pulled within the parameters of the Super NES back in the day is nothing short of incredible in terms of graphical and atmospheric storytelling. I have to admit, Monotone, I have not heard of Fishing Vacation before, but now that I've looked it up, color me intrigued. It looks to be available on Steam and the Nintendo Switch. And this game is part fishing adventure, part atmospheric horror by the looks of it. The pixel art style looks great, and I think it's enough for me to keep an eye on this one at the very least. And speaking of Clock Tower Rewind, I actually got my hands on a physical copy of it, so I am very anxious to give it a whirl at some point. I'm glad to hear that you think developer Human Entertainment did a good job with this title. I personally feel like I owe it to myself to experience this at some point, as Clock Tower just comes off to me as a now legendary horror experience. Number 7. This game is one that I keep coming back to, much more than I ever thought I would. I featured it on episode 15 of the podcast, and I recently wrote a blog highlighting why it is I think this game is so unique. That game is Haunting Ground, which is exclusive to the PlayStation 2 and still stands as the rarest physical game in my gaming collection. Longtime listeners of the show probably know this game thanks to my love for it, but in case you're new here or need a refresher, let's dive in. From developer Capcom, Haunting Ground begins with Fiona Belli, a young woman who wakes up confused and alone inside a sprawling Gothic castle after surviving a car accident. She doesn't remember how she got there or who brought her in, but it doesn't take too long to realize that she's being watched, and she's being hunted. As Fiona searches for a way out, she discovers the castle's dark secrets and meets a loyal companion, Huey, a white shepherd who becomes her protector. Together, Fiona and Huey must navigate the twisting corridors, evade a series of deranged pursuers, and uncover the horrifying truth about why Fiona was brought to this place. Every footstep echoes through the halls like a warning, and the sense of isolation never truly fades. What makes Haunting Ground so terrifying to me is its raw sense of vulnerability. Playing as Fiona, you are just as much trapped in this castle as she is, and the castle itself feels both beautiful but also suffocating at the same time. I remember playing this game for the first time and being genuinely unsettled by this game, its themes and overall atmosphere. Which was a new feeling for me when playing these types of games, which endeared me to it in a sick and twisted way, I suppose. Sort of like Outlast, you have no weapons that you can use in this game. All you have are your wits and Fiona's loyal dog Huey to rely on. The fear comes from that helplessness, from the moments where you hear your pursuer's footsteps echoing down the corridor, and you have to decide whether you want to run, try to hide, or command Huey to defend you. The bond that you end up forming with Huey over the course of the game isn't just emotional, but it's very dependent upon your actual survival. Haunting Ground thrives on psychological tension rather than cheap scares. Each of Fiona's stalkers has a disturbing and almost tragic obsession with her, and that adds an unsettling layer of realism to the horror. You're not just running from monsters, you're running from people with twisted motives, and that makes every encounter feel very personal. These people are out to take something from you, and it's not necessarily your life. The castle itself, too, feels very much alive with its eerie stillness, shadowy corners, and cryptic puzzles that'll make you second-guess every choice you make. Very often I would find myself turning down a hallway and wondering if I should continue on the path or backpedal where I came. It's been a while since I saw a stalker, I had no idea where they might be. Adding to all of this was the game's soundtrack, which seemed to be designed specifically to crawl under your skin, with whispering voices and uneasy strings that follow you wherever you go. What makes Haunting Ground so memorable to me, though, is how it blends fear and, of all things, empathy. Now, I know, empathy is like the last thing you'd expect out of a video game like this, but as the player, you grow to genuinely care about Fiona and Huey, and their survival feels like your personal responsibility. When I played through the game, every time Huey would whimper, or anytime Fiona stumbled in panic, I felt that. And when the two of them finally were able to work together to turn the tables on their tormentors, it's a moment of triumph that few horror games can really deliver. It's one thing to find a shotgun hanging on a wall for you to take, but it's another thing to wiggle your way past the thing chasing you because you used your wits and built a bond with an unlikely ally that paid off. It's an overlooked masterpiece from Capcom's PlayStation 2 era. Elegant, yet disturbing. The kind of game that doesn't just scare you while you play, but lingers long after you've escaped the castle. Assuming you escape the castle at all, that is.
Excuse me, but where are we? And how did I get here?
Yes, Master. We will keep her here for a while. I will make sure she stays comfortable.
Our next community comment comes from Alex, aka Anubis Hero, who reached out over via the SuperPod Lounge. Here's Alex's favorite spooky game. For me, it's Alan Wake. The creepy shadow monsters and the first-time playthrough was amazing story and world building. Good call with this one, Alex. I adore Alan Wake, and I played it to completion when it first launched on the Xbox 360, however long ago that was. I was glued to the story, even though I didn't understand everything it had going on. The monsters shrouded in darkness were awesome, and from a gameplay standpoint, I loved how you had to burn the darkness away before you could actually deal damage to them. Personally, I never found Alan Wake to be all that scary or tense, but I could absolutely see it that way. It's a wonderful world, rife with intrigue and a lot of references to horror culture. I do have the remake of Alan Wake that I grabbed on sale at one point, so one of these days I will be revisiting Bright Falls and taking on the dark presence once again. Number 6. A remake of one of my absolute favorite video games of all time, and the reason I once owned a Nintendo GameCube. Number 6 on my list of favorite spooky games is the Resident Evil remake, released back in 2002. A game that's over 20 years old, the remake of the original PlayStation classic not only made this version of the iconic original the definitive way to experience the birth of this amazing franchise, it is still a genuinely good and spooky time today thanks to its amazing visuals, fantastic presentation, and the introduction to a sinister enemy that throws a wrench into all of your plans for survival. The 2002 remake of Resident Evil begins with the Elite Stars team investigating a series of gruesome murders in the outskirts of Raccoon City. When their helicopter goes down in the forest, they take refuge in a massive, decaying mansion they happen to stumble across in the woods, a place that feels very wrong the moment that everyone steps inside. The doors slam shut behind them, and it doesn't take long before the team realizes that they're not alone. Something is moving in the shadows, something that used to be human. As either Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield, you explore the mansion's twisting corridors, uncovering the secrets hidden in the mansion and fighting to survive a night filled with monsters, terrible puzzles, and sheer terror. Every creak of the floorboards feels like a warning, because in this house, the dead do not stay dead. The remake of Resident Evil took a game that was already a cornerstone of survival horror and transformed it into something truly haunting. The Spencer Mansion felt alive in a way that it never had before. Its walls were glistening with decay, every flicker of candlelight threatening to reveal something lurking just out of view. This game came together to be the complete package. The updated visuals, lighting, and sound design worked together to create a suffocating atmosphere where silence became your worst enemy. You would hear distant footsteps, a door creaking somewhere upstairs, or the slow, wet groan of something waking up, and then you'd freeze. Hands tight on the controller, just waiting for the next scare. But what really got under my skin were the Crimson Heads. For the first time, killing a zombie didn't mean safety. If you didn't destroy the body, decapitate it, or burn it, it would rise again. Faster, meaner, and way hungrier than before. The first time one of those things bolted upright and charged down a hallway, I realized just how dangerous the mansion truly was this time around, and this wasn't going to be the same experience I had before. The whole idea of the Crimson Heads and how they work flipped the old survival horror logic on its head. Suddenly, every corpse was a ticking time bomb, and every ounce of oil you carried to make a fire was a precious lifeline. What makes this remake so memorable to me, though, wasn't just its scares, but its tension. It forced you to plan every move, not just to survive, but you had to somehow manage your own fear along with everything else. Your limited ammunition, the tight camera angles, and haunting ambient sound kept you on edge from start to finish. As a diehard fan of the Resident Evil series, this is the game where the mansion itself became a character for me. It was cold, sometimes elegant, but always cruel. The Resident Evil remake didn't just update a classic, it redefined what survival horror could be and should be, proving that sometimes the scariest thing in a game isn't what's coming for you, but what's already lying still on the floor. And it's waiting for you. Next up for our community comments is Charred Monk, who dropped some of their favorite spooky games over in the SuperPod Lounge as well. They said, I have to go with Dead Space and Silent Hill 2, followed very closely by Alien Isolation. These games are incredible and some of the most difficult to get through from the stress they provide, LOL. Fantastic picks right there, Monk. I did want to hone in on Alien Isolation, though. Of the 3 games that you mentioned, I have not played this one yet, and I am very eager to give it a shot. I love the first couple of Alien movies, and the idea of being put in a scenario where a xenomorph is on the prowl sounds very, very awesome to me. The only thing that I am somewhat worried about is the game's length. I heard it's not a very short game, and I would hate for the charm of being chased to wear off as time goes by. But I guess that's the risk you run with that sort of experience. Still, it's a new type of horror that I am dying to play. Number 5. Number 5 on my list of favorite spooky video games is a game that further propelled me down the rabbit hole of scary video games, and it's one that I still get spooked by, even today, and even with it coming out on the original PlayStation back in 1999. And that game, if it's not evident by the game's iconic opening music, is Silent Hill. I covered Silent Hill on episode 7 of the podcast, and I often think about doing a re-explored episode, giving it the polish it deserves. This game remains an all-time favorite overall for me, and it's thanks in part to the fact that my stepdad and I played this together when I was younger, and I loved how much fun we had with it. The game scared the shit out of both of us, but we never admitted that, of course. The original Silent Hill begins with Harry Mason searching for his missing adopted daughter, Cheryl, after a mysterious car accident on the fog-shrouded roads near the eerie town of Silent Hill. As he enters the deserted streets, the town seems quiet at first, but that silence quickly turns unsettling. Buildings loom like shadows, fog and darkness obscure every corner, and every sound, from distant footsteps to the creak of a shutter, feels amplified. Soon, Harry realizes that he isn't alone. The town hides twisted creatures and nightmarish visions, and the deeper and deeper he goes, the more Silent Hill begins to warp around him, plunging him into darkness. What makes the original Silent Hill so frightening to me is its mastery of atmosphere and psychological tension. From the moment you step into the foggy streets, the game creates a sense of isolation that never lets up. The fog itself becomes a character in a sense, obscuring threats and making every corner a potential ambush. You're constantly on edge, unsure if that distant sound was just part of the environment or something far more sinister moving just out of sight. I feel most people may already know this, but the game's iconic fog came about because the developers of Silent Hill, Team Silent, wanted the town to be a sprawling location you could seamlessly walk through, but the PlayStation didn't have the ability to render long distances. That's where the game's iconic fog was born. It masked the game loading textures and objects just out of sight. It was genius game design, and now anytime you see or think of fog in any capacity, it all comes back to Silent Hill. The creatures of Silent Hill are equally unsettling because they aren't just monsters roaming around. They're twisted reflections of the town's darkness and even subtle hints as to what sort of anguish drives the mystery around the town. Every encounter feels unnerving rather than purely action-driven, forcing players to confront the grotesque and the unfamiliar. The limited ammo, clunky controls, and hauntingly empty environments amplify that helplessness, making each step forward feel like a calculated risk. Anytime I played this game with my stepdad, or anytime I play it today, I somehow never feel truly safe, even in a room that seems secure. And then there's the psychological horror that you experience during your journey and lingers long after the game ends. Silent Hill doesn't just want to scare you, it wants to make you unsettled. It's about the creeping dread that grows in the quiet moments, the sense that something unseen is always watching. Combined with its oppressive sound design, disturbing visuals, and haunting musical score thanks to Akira Yamaoka, the game always has a way of driving me into a nightmare that feels both personal and inescapable. It's a masterclass in tension and terror, and even decades later, the original Silent Hill remains a benchmark for atmospheric horror in gaming. I try to find time to play this game whenever I can, and even though I've probably played this game through to completion over a dozen times up to this point, Silent Hill always finds a way to make me feel on edge and short of breath.
Cheryl!
Spooky. With that, we move into our next community comment. Dre from Fine Time had this to say: "For my money, you can't beat Silent Hill 3. I am really glad someone brought this game up. Of the first 3 main Silent Hill games, I think 3 is actually my least favorite, but I think that's in part because I spent the least amount of time with it compared to the others, and I don't remember much about it. I will be covering SH3 on the show at some point, so it'll be great to re-experience this classic. I think the plot was a bit lost on me, and I'm not a big fan of a certain narrative decision early on, but I remember being genuinely tense when I did play this game. Oh, and who can forget that room with the mirror? That is the place nightmares are born." Number 4. Number 4 is a game that always, without fail, comes to mind when I think about not just great, scary experiences, but good video games in general. And that game is Dead Space. Dead Space is one of those games for me that no matter how many times I play it, I always feel tense and I always feel on edge when I do, even when I'm pretty sure I know where all the enemies are going to be coming from. That's how you know the game's atmosphere is done incredibly well, when you're still second-guessing yourself like that. While sci-fi horror isn't my preferred horror experience, there's something to be said about this game being as high on the list as it is. Dead Space throws you into the role of Isaac Clarke, an engineer sent to investigate the USG Ishimura, a massive mining ship that has gone dark in space. From the moment Isaac boards the seemingly abandoned vessel, the tension is palpable. Lights flicker, alarms echo through empty corridors, and the ship's once bustling interiors are now drenched in blood and decay. It doesn't take long for him and us as the player to realize the crew has been transformed into grotesque, violent creatures known as necromorphs. With only his engineering tools as weapons, Isaac must navigate the claustrophobic, zero-gravity corridors, uncover the horrifying truth behind the outbreak, and survive long enough to escape the nightmare that has overtaken the Ishimura. When I stepped aboard the Ishimura for the very first time, I was hooked on this game. The atmosphere, tension, and the mystery the game throws at you in just the opening few minutes was more than enough to get me vested in what's to come. The ship should have been alive with the hum of machinery and the clatter of the crew, but instead it was silent, it was empty. Every corridor I walked down felt like it was closing in on me, the lights flickering and the shadows twisting in ways that made me second-guess almost everything I saw or thought I saw. But then I saw them for the very first time, the necromorphs. Bodies twisted and reshaped into grotesque forms, crawling and lunging with unnatural speed. I still remember how my heart pounded as I ran from them for the very first time, and later how I had to reteach myself how to fight by aiming at their limbs, learning quickly that precision and patience was my only real allies. Every room, every vent, every shadow felt like a potential ambush, and even when I thought I was safe, I could hear the eerie metallic scraping of something stalking me just out of sight. What made the experience unforgettable for me, though, wasn't just the monsters or the visceral gore. It was the sheer helplessness, that claustrophobia I mentioned, and the way the ship itself seemed to be alive with some sort of menace or malice. Every alarm, every distant scream, every flicker of light put me on edge, and even after surviving one encounter, I knew the next one could come from anywhere. Even when I got into a groove of fighting the necromorphs, and as I got stronger as I went, I still felt very vulnerable and I never felt safe. The game's amazing sound design helped with this, and like I've mentioned with other games, this game also had me wondering if the noises I had just heard were in the game or somewhere in my home. Dead Space didn't just scare me, it made me feel isolated, and it put genuine fear in me. And it's a game that sticks with you long after the lights are back on. I'll never forget how it felt to feel that initial wave of tension build and then have it come crashing down as the necromorphs swarmed in for the very first time, showing me just what sort of terror I had descended into.
The tram system's offline. Getting around is going to be difficult. The air seems to be flowing again. That's a start.
What the hell was that?
Automatic quarantine must have tripped when the filtration system restarted. Everybody relax.
What was that? Did you hear that?
Not sure.
What the hell? I don't know. Something's in the room with us.
Jesus! Open fire! Open fire! Linda, power! Linda!
Come on. Come on. Got it!
Isaac, get the hell out of there!
The doors are locked! Run! Run, Isaac! Get the hell out of there!
Number 3. Heading into the top 3 now, and the competition for my favorite is very tight. In the number 3 slot, though, is another remake that took yet another of my childhood favorites and transformed it into a fantastic horror experience. It became a game that filled me with genuine fear, and it had me wondering how in the hell I was going to survive. That game, my friends, was the Resident Evil 2 remake. When Capcom announced that they were going to be remaking this game, I was all in from the very beginning. I had no doubt in my mind that they would do the original justice and create a fantastic new horror experience for myself and others to enjoy. A lot of that may have just been the hopeful fanboy in me, but this game, in my opinion, set the bar at the time for what a good remake is, and should be for anyone looking to remake any classic title. I was surprised to find that Resident Evil 2 scared me again, and being back in Raccoon City with monsters all around me truly made me tense and unsettled, and looking back, I am so thankful this game exists. The 2019 remake of Resident Evil 2 drops you into the nightmare from the very first moment. You step into the shoes of either rookie cop Leon S. Kennedy or college student Claire Redfield, both arriving in Raccoon City just as a viral outbreak has turned the streets into a chaotic, blood-soaked hellscape. Chaos erupts immediately, and our heroes arrive just in time to witness the aftermath. There's crashed vehicles, fires, and panicked survivors filling the streets, and it doesn't take long before zombies and other horrors begin to hunt you. Fleeing to the iconic Raccoon City Police Department, you find its halls dark, twisted, and crawling with zombies, and soon we also find that something much sinister is roaming the halls, searching for us. From the moment you begin, the game throws you into a tense survival horror gauntlet that barely lets up. Everything is a threat, and the series staple zombies that are so easy to overlook as a minor inconvenience are now guaranteed terrors and threats to your survival. I still remember popping in the game disc in my PlayStation, and when I stepped back into Raccoon City for the first time in what felt like ages, I felt like I was back home. If my home were full of palpable tension, that is. The streets were littered with overturned cars, fires burned in the distance, and the groans of the undead echoed through every alley. I could feel that I wasn't just walking into a dangerous situation, I was walking into a literal nightmare. A lot of that had to do with the amazing presentation that the RE2 remake brought to the table. The hallways of the police department were dark, the shadows were cast deep, and the silence was broken only by the distant moans of zombies or the occasional crash from somewhere just out of sight. It wasn't all just scary to me, it was legitimately nerve-wracking, forcing me to stay alert every second. The game's sound design created an atmosphere I had only imagined in my head when I was playing the original game on the PlayStation. From the ambient sounds around me to the oh-so-realistic pops when I used my weapons. Everything was meticulously crafted to pull me into the game world and make me feel like I was just moments away from meeting an untimely death. Then there's Mr. X. He isn't just another monster, he's a looming, near unstoppable force. For those that may not know, Mr. X is a huge humanoid monster who wears a trench coat and is always following you around, moving from room to room trying to find you, in real time, mind you. Mr. X doesn't appear in the original game until you've played through the game a second time, so imagine my surprise and horror when I saw him pretty early into my very first playthrough. Even when I thought I was safe, those heavy thumps of his boots would echo through the halls, reminding me that he was always out there, always searching for me. The sheer dread of knowing he could appear at any moment made exploration terrifying yet very exhilarating. I couldn't plan around him like a normal enemy. Every room I entered felt like it could be my last, and every second had me holding my breath, waiting for him to pop around the next corner, which he absolutely does on occasion, and it always scares the shit out of me. There were a few times I was able to keep just out of sight, and I remember holding my breath, literally, while I watched him move past me, sight unseen, and go into another room. And I remember thanking God, or whatever had my back in that moment, that I was still alive. Mr. X's sheer presence transformed the police station from just a creepy environment into a true survival gauntlet. What makes the RE2 remake so unforgettable for me, though, wasn't just those jump scares, the grotesque zombies, or the fact that Mr. X himself was out in the halls stalking me. It was all a combination of that. It was the constant, suffocating tension that it built. If you've been paying attention in the show so far, it all keeps coming back to that tension for me. The real threat of the normal zombies this time around, and that looming presence of Mr. X, it all kept my pulse high the entire time. The 2019 remake didn't just modernize a classic. It gave Little Nomad the one thing I wanted so badly when I was a kid. It found a way to make me feel like I was genuinely trapped in Raccoon City, and that every single moment I was truly fighting for my survival.
Stop moving.
Officer, you need help?
Stay back, sir. I got this.
Freeze! I'll shoot! Damn it!
Before we move on, we had a little bit of love for the RE2 remake from the community. The Deleted Saves podcast had this to say. Both Resident Evil 2 original and remake are my favorites. For all their sometimes goofiness, they're as close as we've come in games to that George Romero-style survivors stumbling into a flesh-tearing apocalypse and needing to survive. Dead Space original and remake are my second favorite for the same reason, just in space. We also had Jay from the Waffling Tailors podcast chime in over on our Blue Sky page. Regarding his favorite spooky game, Jay said, "Definitely the RE2 remake. For me, it was an almost lifelike horror, especially with the graphical leap since the original. Another is an old favorite of mine, Shadow Man, but either the Dreamcast or PC versions. They have a psychological level of horror." My friends, I think the three of us can agree that it's the more realistic, almost lifelike horror that Resident Evil 2 Remake brings to the table that really sets it up as something special. And when I say realistic, I mean as realistic as you can get visually and with the gameplay when it comes to living corpses trying to eat you and bioorganic weapons trying to end you. And Deleted Saves is spot on with the Romero comment. RE2 Remake is about as close to that style of horror in video game form as we've gotten. Oh, and before moving on, I do want to shout out Jay's podcast, The Waffling Tailors. Jay brought up the game Shadow Man at the very end of his comment, and I've got to say, it is an interesting game, one that I am hoping to play one day. Jay did an episode on that game on his show a while back, and after listening to it, it did prompt me to pick the game up to try for myself, so if I think of it, I will put a link to that show in the show notes. Shadow Man is a very interesting game, to say the absolute least.
Number 2.
Tell and Rhodey. Go tell and Rhodey. Go tell and Rhodey that everybody's dead.
Resident Evil 7 Biohazard is my number 2 favorite spooky video game. After Resident Evil 4, the series had taken a real turn towards action and high-octane set pieces. However, in 2017, RE7 came along and said, fuck that shit, it's time to bring back the series' iconic horror in a new way. While Resident Evil 7 isn't my absolute favorite in the Resident Evil series, I found it incredibly fun to play, and the developers absolutely nailed the horror element for me. At the time, I wasn't sure a first-person Resident Evil would work, but boy was I wrong. While I do think the game does fall apart a little bit in the latter half of the game, that does not take away, at least for me, how immersive this experience was. One of these years I need to play this game in VR and see if I can make it all the way through the experience that way, though I know plenty of people that have told me that they have tried and just can't do it, which just excites me more if I'm being honest. Resident Evil 7 begins with Ethan Winters, an ordinary man searching for his missing wife, Mia, after receiving a mysterious message from her 3 years after she vanished. His search leads him deep into the swamps of Louisiana, to a decaying plantation house that looks like it's been forgotten by time. At first, the place seems just merely abandoned, but as Ethan ventures further inside, he discovers something is not quite right. The house itself is home to the Baker family, a group of grotesque, violent, and seemingly unkillable people who welcome him to the family with sheer brutality. As Ethan struggles to survive and uncover the truth about what's happened to Mia, he's dragged into a nightmare filled with body horror and psychological torment. As soon as the game began and I made my way to the Baker home in the middle of the woods, I knew I was in for an experience. Everything about the house felt wrong. The flickering of dying light bulbs, the rot in the air, the sound of footsteps that were not mine echoing through the halls. Playing from a first-person perspective made me feel trapped inside of Ethan's shoes, unable to look away from whatever horror was around the next corner. There's something uniquely terrifying about being forced to stare straight ahead when you desperately want to turn away. It wasn't just that the house around me was falling apart and dying. The house itself was very much alive in that quiet, dreadful way that made every moment feel unsafe. The thing about roaming the house, from what I remember, is there weren't a lot of enemies to fight, really. You had to dodge the Bakers who were coming after you, and that was really it. The house itself was more or less the enemy that you had to fight, and I thought it was all really well done. Speaking of the Bakers, they were the stars of the game for me. The Bakers being Jack, Marguerite, and Lucas, each one a different flavor of nightmare. There was Jack with his unstoppable rage, smashing through walls like a horror movie slasher. There was Marguerite, skittering through her filthy greenhouse and whispering your name in the dark. And then there was Lucas, the twisted mind behind tons of these traps that made the Saw movies out to be like kids' movies. Every encounter with the Bakers made me uneasy, not just from the sheer fear of it all, but from the sheer unpredictability of it all. The game blurred the line between survival and suffering. I wasn't just running from monsters or running from the Bakers, I was clawing through the madness of a family gone completely wrong. Oh, and let's not forget about creepy Grandma Baker, who always seemed to be watching you from the oddest places. What really stuck with me about Resident Evil 7 was the first-person view, the claustrophobic setting, and the raw vulnerability of having no idea what's waiting behind the next door, and it gave the entire experience an intimacy that most horror games don't quite reach. It was a reinvention of the Resident Evil 7 formula that reminded me what true survival horror feels like. I felt small, I felt like I was suffocating, and I felt very human with all of our vulnerabilities on full display. Every creak or groan I heard the house make made my pulse race, and by the time I escaped that house, I felt like I had actually legitimately survived something, not just played through it. There was a rush of adrenaline that playing Resident Evil 7 gives me that very few games today do, and it's almost addictive to experience. And it all started with a warning, a plea to stay away.
Ethan. You were right. I did lie to you. I shouldn't have. All I can say is that if you get this, stay away.
Alright, we're just about to see which game made number 1 on my list of spooky video games, but before we get there, we've got a few more community correspondence that came in. I was floored by how many comments were submitted for this topic, so thank you all for taking the time, seriously. It warms my heart that you want to share some of your favorite spooky video games with little old me. Anyway, let's work through these and see what other spooky games you're all into before we get into my favorite. First up, my buddy Chris, the Manatee King, chimed in over on our Instagram page. As one of his favorite spooky games, Chris simply said, Telltale's Walking Dead. Fantastic game, and it's a game that I think about from time to time. Focused mainly on narrative and player choice, I never really found the game to be all that scary or tense to me, but there were a few moments where the tension was absolutely there. I think it was one of the few zombie games that Justine ended up watching me play, and if she can stomach the scares and tense situations in that game, it's not too bad. Still, a fantastic game with a fantastic story, and the first season has one hell of an ending. It was one of the few games that legitimately made a tear swell up in my eye. Next, Dr. Data. Dr. Data? Dr. D. Dr. D spoke up in the SuperPod Lounge and said, in my opinion, people should play the Lady Dracula demo for Halloween. Doctor, I am assuming you're talking about Lady Dracula over on Steam. I'm guessing you might have a hand in that game? Looks to be an old school Castlevania style side-scroller. It's not out yet, but it looks really, really neat. Having said all that, if anyone's interested, head on over to Steam and check it out. Moving along, Chris, aka Sumo Kirby, calls out a spooky game that I've never heard of until now. Chris said, Monster Party for the NES. What's scarier than fighting a giant fried shrimp and onion rings? With a comment like that, I had to know what in the holy hell this game was, so I took to the internet. Apparently, Monster Party on the NES is a, quote, relatively obscure game for the console, having a small following among some players. The game both pays homage to and parodies horror pop culture, end quote. Well, that sells it for me. I will be sure to check this game out one way or another. It's a homage to horror pop culture and you fight a giant fried shrimp? No way I don't give this one a try. Thank you very much for calling this one out, Chris. Next up, we had Jala-chan reach out on Discord. Jala said, Among the Sleep. You play as a toddler looking for his mom, and the world is warped and distorted to reflect the anxiety a small child faces. When you find out what was actually happening, it's very affecting. I have never heard of this game before, Jala, but after looking it up, I am very intrigued by this. I'm always open to new horror experiences, but this really sounds unique the way that you play as a toddler and have to work through their anxieties in this way. I'm not sure if it's the best comparison, but this reminded me of a specific section in the game, What Remains of Edith Finch. You take control of a baby in that game, and without spoiling anything, I was impressed with how the game tailored the narrative and how the game world itself kind of molded as you navigated through the world based on the fact that you were a baby. Very creative, and it was very charming. As far as Among the Sleep goes, I am very interested to see about this more serious take. Up next, Robert from our Retro Wildlands Facebook page said, I really liked Doom 3, especially the early versions as you can't have a gun and flashlight out at the same time. The game really has a creepy vibe throughout. I'm really glad you mentioned Doom 3. I completely forgot about this one. In my mind, I usually just think of Doom as a fast-paced shooter that happens to contain some demons and dark imagery. I never think of the series as scary or tense. But to your point, Doom 3 was different. It was considered to be pretty scary overall, mainly due to the focus on more atmospheric tones that elicited anxiety and dread. There were frequent jump scares, environments were dark, they were claustrophobic, and I gotta say, while I do plan to play through all the Doom titles that I've missed out on, Doom 3 is now top of my list for all these spooky reasons. Very, very good call on this one, Robert. Our final community correspondence comes from Lindsay from the YouTube channel LL Cool Games and fellow member of the crew over at channel3.gg. Lindsay said, "Oh my gosh, I could talk for hours about Eternal Darkness on the GameCube. It's actually a great story with good gameplay, but the wicked twists and mind games that are played on the gamer. It's a life-changing game that I'd hope every gamer, even ones who don't really like spooky stuff, like me, could experience. There is a reason this game is pricey if you can even find a copy." Man, Eternal Darkness, another great pull. While I don't have a physical copy of the game, I do have the means to play it, if you catch my drift. This is yet another game on my spooky game backlog. I'm even more interested in this game now that you said that you're not much into scary stuff, but you still really got into this game, enough to call it life-changing. The one thing I remember hearing about this game that I always thought was neat was the game's sanity meter, and how crazy things would happen to the player as the meter filled up. I did read that Nintendo still holds the rights to this game and also has a patent on the sanity meter mechanic, so there really isn't a game out there quite like this in the wild right now. Maybe we'll see it on the Switch too now that you can play GameCube games on it. Or maybe Eternal Darkness will get remastered. Either way, I will dive into this game one of these days. Maybe. If my own sanity meter doesn't overflow with all the other games that I'm trying to juggle. Alright, and that is all for the community comments. Again, a huge thank you and shout out to everyone who took time out of their day to share their favorite spooky games with me. I hope some of you listening either heard about a new to you game that interests you, or reminded you of a game that you may want to get on one of these days. With the mention of games like Among the Sleep and Doom 3 for me, for instance, I know my personal backlog just got a little bit bigger. Okay, we are finally here, my friends. Let's finish things up by finally talking about my number one favorite spooky video game. Number one. My absolute favorite spooky video game, as of this recording, is the Silent Hill 2 remake. Holy shit, was this game incredible, just absolutely incredible. When it was announced that Silent Hill 2 was getting the remake treatment, I was not all that excited initially. The original game on the PlayStation 2 was arguably a perfect horror experience on its own. It didn't need a new coat of paint or anything redone or expanded. But when I got my hands on this game and gave it a try, I was blown away by my experience. And when I say the word experience, I do not use that word lightly. Rarely do I find a game that has me thinking about it long after I've completed it, but the SH2 remake is one of those games. Even though I already knew the story going in, this game found a way to stick with me yet again long after the credits had rolled. And as for the horror and the scare factors, it was such an immersive experience and an intense experience for me that I had to take breaks, literal breaks, every 30 minutes or so just to pull myself back to reality and keep myself grounded. I have never had a horror experience like that before. In Silent Hill 2, as well as in the remake, you step into the role of James Sunderland, a man drawn into the fog-filled town of Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his wife Mary, who says she's waiting for him in Silent Hill, waiting for him in their special place. The only thing about this letter is that Mary couldn't possibly have wrote it, because she has been dead for years. The game opens with James staring at his reflection in a grimy bathroom mirror, questioning his own sanity as he clings to the hope that she might somehow still be alive. When he ventures into Silent Hill, the quiet streets are swallowed by mist and lined with a sort of decay, the world itself seeming to shift and breathe in rhythm with his unease and desperation. As James searches for answers, he encounters monsters that feel like twisted reflections of his own guilt and grief, pulling him deeper into a personal nightmare where every step forward feels like a descent into his own mind. Or maybe it's just a descent into sheer madness. When I threw the remake in for the very first time and I stepped back into that town, stepped back into Silent Hill, I felt it in my gut. That quiet dread, that oppressive stillness that seems to sit on your chest. Everything about this remake captures that uneasy feeling around you, that sense of being watched even when you're completely alone. The fog seems to be thicker and heavier than ever, swallowing up the world a few feet in front of you, and the only sounds that cut through it are your own footsteps and that faint, broken radio static that tells you something's out there. Visually, the game is stunning in the worst possible way, or the best kind of way, depending on how you look at it. It all projects a kind of realism that doesn't comfort, but instead makes you feel trapped. Every shadow feels deliberate, every flicker of light feels like it's hiding something, and the game's atmosphere is so relentless that, like I mentioned before, I had to stop more than once just to physically collect myself. As James, you're not just running from monsters, you're running from yourself. The creatures in Silent Hill aren't just random abominations, they're seemingly manifestations of his guilt, shame, and grief, and the remake leans into that with the subtlety and precision the original game was known for. Facing down some of the town's monsters, like the twitching mannequins or the gasping, faceless nurses, felt deeply personal, like pieces of a puzzle you don't want to solve. Every confrontation feels like an emotional one, just as much as it is a physical one, and that's what makes Silent Hill 2's brand of horror so uniquely satisfying to me. But of all the things this game and even the remake bring to the table, it's the atmosphere. The sound and silence. All of it really resonated with me. The thing about the sound and even the silence, the developers absolutely, knowingly used it like a weapon. Regarding the sound specifically, the distant hum of machinery, the echo of something moving in the fog, the mournful score that seems to bleed sorrow and torment into every moment. It all got under my skin in a way that few games ever have. Even if I didn't just outright take a break from the game, sometimes I would just find myself pausing the game for a moment just to escape the tension and collect myself, and then get right back to it. While playing the game, even standing still felt risky, like the town itself threatened to swallow me whole if I lingered too long. It's one of those experiences that isn't just scary because of what's happening, but because of how real it feels. The sound design, the lighting, the pacing, all working together to make every moment feel alive and haunted. What makes the Silent Hill 2 remake my absolute favorite scary video game right now isn't just that it scared me, it's that it stayed with me. The story and the experience you have lingers like the fog itself, and I often find it creeping back into my thoughts. And I haven't even played this game since it was released last year. It has stuck with me that hard. The Silent Hill 2 remake is not horror in the traditional sense of jump scares and loud noises, it's the emotional horror. It's the fear of what we bury deep down inside, the parts of ourselves we pretend not to see. It's beautifully tragic, hauntingly quiet, and powerful enough to make you feel something long after the credits roll. Good horror, for me, is all of these things. While I love me a good jump scare and a good rush of adrenaline, the best kinds of horror are the ones that grip you in the moment and linger long after the moment is over.
In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday, but you never did. Well, I'm alone there now, in our special place, waiting for you.
And that is going to be the end of the line for us, my friends. This has been episode 74 of the Retro Wildlands, my top 10 favorite spooky video games. Thank you very much for tuning into the show today. You know, when I think about all the games we've talked about today, it reaffirmed my stance that horror isn't just about the monsters or the jump scares. It's about the feelings they stir up. These games made my heart race, sure, but they also made me reflect, remember, and appreciate how fear can be both thrilling and strangely comforting. Being scared or putting myself in a spooky situation is a very unique escape. Each game we talked about today is a reminder of why I fell in love with spooky games in the first place. So, as the fire burns low and Dee Dee drifts off to sleep, I'll leave you with this. Do not be afraid to lean into the dark every now and then. You never know what kind of game or memorable story might be waiting for you there. If you liked the show today and you want to show it and myself some support, please consider subscribing to the Retro Wildlands on your preferred podcasting platform. This podcast and all the other neat things that I do are all done in my limited free time, so it's always hard for me to hit a consistent release schedule, even though I'm always working on something. Subscribing to the show will make sure that you're notified the moment I publish something new. You can also follow us on our social media pages, or you can check out our brand new website, theretrowildlands.com, for the latest on the show, check out some mini game reviews and blogs that I've written, or even check out some of the videos that I've made or links to podcasts that I've been a guest on. The Retro Wildlands is also part of the SuperPod Network, home of some other awesome video game podcasts and other gaming content, and you can follow us over there at superpodnetwork.com. Other than this show, you can check out some awesome shows such as the Elder Trolls Gaming Podcast, Super Ghost Radio, the Pre-Order Bonus Podcast, Friday Night Gamecast, and more. There's blog posts, videos, and tons of other content, so be sure to check all of that out by heading over to superpodnetwork.com. Now, if you really like the show and you have a little bit of time that you can spare this spooky season, I would love it if you can give us a good review or even share the show on your favorite social media platform with your friends. You can leave a star rating for the show over on Spotify, but you can leave that and a written review over on iTunes, Podchaser, Podbean, and Podcast Addict, just to name a few spots. Good reviews and shares will help the show appear in more search feeds, I would assume, but more than that, it'll let me know that you like what it is that I'm trying to do here and that I'm delivering something that you truly enjoy. But my friends, like I mention every episode, you are under no obligation to do any of this. Just the fact that you are listening to my show right now is much more than I could have ever asked for, so above all else, thank you for being here. So, what's coming up next? Well, as I write and record these words, we are still knee-deep into spooky season, and I want to sneak in a focused episode on at least one spooky game this year. But the question is, which to pick? Well, when I look at my wall of games and think of spooky experiences, I always find myself going back to my wall of PlayStation 2 games. There's a lot of scary bangers on that system that I'm hoping to get my hands on one day. But one game I do have in particular has been calling to me, especially since a remake of it was announced for 2026. It's a game that I'm told is exceptional, and it makes me think it might make a run for my top 10 list here. So that alone means I should probably get on it. That being said, next time on the Retro Wildlands, I'm going to be diving into, for the very first time, Fatal Frame 2: Crimson Butterfly. This game is widely considered to be one of the scariest horror games, so I'm very eager to fully immerse myself in this experience and see if I can replicate just some of that next time with you all. It should be a fun and spooky time, so I hope I get to see all of you again next time when we take our expedition to Minakami Village, where ghosts and spirits roam, and the only defense we have against them is the notorious camera obscura. Until then, my friends, my name is Nomad, and you can find me roaming the Retro Wildlands.